Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer 55551, and I am back with a video review for this one. For this one, I want to take a look at the Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk 2077, which was a launch title for when the Nintendo Switch 2 came out. It is also worth pointing out, and also to point out that this is supposedly the Ultimate Edition. It's also worth pointing out the game is also available on PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, PC via Steam, and it's also out on Mac as well. And if you're interested in any gameplay footage, I'll have a link down in the description down below, or you can click on the card that appears up on this video, assuming you're watching this either on YouTube or Patreon. For parents out there, it's worth pointing out that Cyberpunk 2077 is rated M for mature audiences only, ages 17 and up by the ESRB rating system, and timestamps will also be in the description of this video if there are certain parts of this video you wish to skip to. Again, assuming you watch this either on YouTube or Patreon. Now, of course, everyone by now knows about Cyberpunk 2077's history. Pretty much when it launched back in 2020, it was not in the best state possible. It led to one of the rarest cases where Sony had to offer refunds for those who purchased the game, though, although nowhere compared to what Steam has with their refund policy and everything like that. And it definitely put a bad mark on CD Projekt Red, which had earned a good reputation. But over the years, they eventually fixed the game, and it was definitely in a better state now than it is. And some of that and also the release of Cyberpunk Edgerunner on Netflix, I think also helped the series as well. This would eventually lead to the Phantom Liberty DLC being available, but only on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S. And since then, the game has basically bounced back and has become a official success and everything. Now, as far as it being on Nintendo's platform or anything like that, I will say that it never really crossed my mind at one point to see this game come to, like the Nintendo platform, particularly the Switch 1 back then. Of course, my opinion on that kind of changed a little bit when we started to see games like Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, Wolfenstein 2 The New Colossus, and then of course in 2019, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was brought over to the Switch 1, courtesy of Saber Interactive that did the port job, and it was a game that they fit entirely into the 32GB cartridge, which at the time was probably the most expensive cartridge available for, the Switch 1 and all. And it was certainly a very impressive port indeed. Obviously, compromises were made to get that game to run on the Switch 1, don't get me wrong, but it was still nevertheless an impressive port for that game to be on the Switch 1 and all. And it definitely, I felt, kind of opened the door to maybe one day Cyberpunk 2077 could maybe make its way over to Nintendo's platform. Though if it did, there wasn't doubt any compromises, no doubt in my mind, compromises had to be made. Obviously, when the game came out in 2020, in the state it was in, though, I wasn't too sure about it bringing it to the Switch 1 and all. So, when it was announced that Nintendo was going to be launching their next system, the Nintendo Switch 2 and all, again, it never really crossed my mind indeed, but I was very curious about the system and everything else. And then when the April 9th Nintendo Direct happened, one of the games that was announced that would be coming to the Switch 2 was Cyberpunk 2077. Now, this kind of surprised me a little bit because the idea of this, which was considered to be a graphically demanding game and all, that kind of caught my attention, and it definitely caught my attention of exactly just how powerful was the Switch 2 was. And we learned some information here and there from ranging from the powered by the T239 chip to it actually utilizing NVIDIA's DLSS technology in the system and all. And it was certainly one of the games I wanted to get at launch. That and the fact that the full game was going to be on the cart and everything. And now after spending some time with the Switch 2 version, I honestly will have to say that while this version may not be for everybody, depending on your preference and taste, I will say for a launch title for the Switch 2, this is definitely a good launch title, and those who like those single player kind of experience game will definitely enjoy Cyberpunk 2077, but again, it will come down to some of your preference and everything. So I'm going to break this down into the pros and the cons. So we'll start off first with the pros, and I will say I am very impressed. I don't know what CD Projekt Red did or what they did with basically the Switch 2's DLSS. There's been some back and forth of it being DLSS 3.1 or 3.0 to it being a custom-made version with input from Nintendo. But whatever the case is, this is very impressive though. I mean, the fact that they got this game running well on the Switch 2 is certainly impressive indeed. I haven't seen everything. Like, I haven't gotten to the Phantom Liberty part or anything like that. There's been some reports of some issues with it, but I've yet to see it. Haven't gotten to that point just yet. But still, the fact that they got this running on the Switch 2 is very impressive, and utilizing the DLSS indeed. Obviously, there is some compromise that have to be made. There may be some areas which may not look as good as, say, like what on the PC or the PS5 or Xbox Series X or S for that matter. But still, this is impressive. This is actually very impressive indeed to see this game running on the Switch 2 and running, I would say, well, at least in my excuse me, at least in my book though. And it certainly opens the door to the possibility of what other games we could see ported over to the Switch 2, especially with the use of this DLSS technology that's one of the interesting features as part of the Switch 2 and all. So yeah, I am extremely impressed of how well this game actually runs on the Switch 2 based on my time with it though. The next thing you want to point out is the gameplay, and just like it was when I tried it out, when it was on Stadia and on Xbox Series S though, the gameplay holds up very well though. It follows a formula similar to what CD Projekt Red did with Witcher and everything, Witcher 3 to be exact. You do have side quests, there is open world, there is RPG elements and all, but it also still holds up, the gameplay still holds up very well, from the gunplay to some of the combat, especially using the sword. I like to use the katana in here though, and the fact that basically and just the lore and the story itself of Night City and the world of Cyberpunk 2077 still is absolutely great. So in terms of the gameplay, it holds up, same with the lore and the story, so that certainly is great indeed. And last but not least, one of the things that I gotta give credit to CD Projekt Red for pulling this off is the fact that you are getting the full game along with the DLC, aka Phantom Liberty though. I don't know what CD Projekt Red did, but they managed to get the full game on the Switch 2 64GB cartridges though, which is very impressive indeed to see a third-party developer and publisher do that compared to what some of the other publishers and developers that we've seen out there that have used what many view as the controversial game key card and all. So the fact that they managed to get the full game on the 64GB Switch 2 cartridges is very impressive. Do I think they may had to make some adjustments here and there? I don't deny that. I'm not an expert, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. But the fact that you're getting the full game on the 64GB cartridge is definitely a good thing indeed, especially for those who are on the game preservation side and who prefer, the physical media. So that certainly is good indeed for those who are picking up the physical version though. Now, as far as the cons go, to be exact, there are only really two cons I could point out, at least based on my time with the Switch 2 version. The first one has to do with the fact that the game, unfortunately for the Switch 2 version, runs at 30 frames per second though. Now, it is worth pointing out the game does have a 40 FPS mode, aka performance mode, but that's only available for those who have a 120 Hz TV or monitor. Sadly, I don't have that, so I couldn't really try out the 40 frames per second mode though. But the fact that the game is running in 30 frames per second, while not terrible, I would say it's a little bit disappointing and all though. Now, 30 frames per second isn't necessarily bad, at least in my book though, and I didn't have really issues with it running at 30 frames per second. Still, I do not deny the fact that given the fact that we have even the Xbox Series S version now runs at 60 frames per second, it is a little bit unfortunate that the Switch 2 version is only running at 30 frames per second and all. Now, it's possible that CD Projekt Red could offer an update one day, maybe for the Switch 2 version, and maybe they could find a way to get it running at 60 frames per second. I mean, they did that with the Xbox Series S version, so it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that maybe they could find a way to get the Switch 2 version running at 60 frames per second. But for now, it's only running at 30 frames per second. And yes, There is a 40 frames per second performance mode, but that's only for those who have 120 hertz TV and monitor. And last but not least, I will say that I am a little mixed with the mouse mode basically in Cyberpunk 2077. Now, for those who don't know, you could play the game with the controller, but they also have the motion controls where you can hold like up the Wii remote, like the two Joy-Cons like a Wii remote and nunchuck and all. And then there's the mouse mode that's sort of the new feature for the Switch 2 and all. And while I didn't have a huge amount of issues with it, it's just, to me, felt a little bit awkward playing with the mouse mode and all. Now, for the record, some of that could be I may have to fool around with the settings. Other thing is the fact that I'm more comfortable with the controller than using the mouse and keyboard. So, again, that will be down to your preference and how you like to play video games, whether it's with a controller or a mouse and keyboard kind of setup, though. But for me, it's an interesting feature, and I'm sure those who fool around with the setting, though, could probably find a way to use the mouse mode in the Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk 2077, but I personally prefer to basically stick with the controller and all. So it's okay, but I prefer the controller, at least from my perspective and everything. Overall, I would say I came away very pleased with Cyberpunk 2077, the Switch 2 version. And it's definitely, for a launch title for the Switch 2, this is definitely one of the most impressive Switch 2 launch titles we've seen out there, and one that really shows why a lot of people do like what CD Projekt Red does, though. At its best, though, it is impressive they got this game running on the Switch 2. It's also very impressive of the capability of the Switch 2's DLSS being used for this game. The gameplay, the story, and the lore still holds up very well, which I think is great. And the fact that the developers got the full game into the 64GB Switch 2 cartridge is definitely good. And I do kind of think that kind of puts a lot of those other third-party developers at kind of shame to a certain degree, considering that CD Projekt Red can do that. But at its worst, however, I do want to point out, though, that it is unfortunate that the game only runs at 30 frames per second on the Switch 2 version, though. There is a performance mode that goes up to 40 frames per second, but again, you gotta have, like, I believe 120 hertz TV and monitor. And I will say I am very mixed on the use of mouse mode for the Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk 2077. But in either case, though, I still came away very impressed and very pleased with this game, indeed. And I am hoping that it does well enough, and I've been hearing there's been supposedly sales-wise it seems to be doing very well, but time will tell if that's the case. But I do hope that it does well enough that it convinces CD Projekt Red not only to bring the sequel to Cyberpunk 2077 that they're working on, but hopefully it opens the door to the possibility of them bringing Witcher 4 over to the Switch 2. I'm hoping that is the case, though. Time will tell if that happens, but I'm hoping that is the case indeed. And it's going to be very interesting to see how other third-party developers utilize the Switch 2 down the road, especially with the use of the DLSS in the Switch 2, how developers will use that. And we've seen some developers have used it, and I think they've done a pretty good job, and CD Projekt Red is certainly one of those developers indeed. As for whether you should get this version or not, that comes down to your preference, though. If you like the idea of playing Cyberpunk 2077 not only at home but bringing it with you on the go, and are not bothered with the 30 frames per second or don't have an issue with the 40 frames per second mode in it, then I would recommend getting the Switch. Then I would say go with the Switch 2 version. However, if you're looking for the best looking version of the game, looking for a higher frame rate on the be exact, or really don't care about portable mode in any way, I would say go with other versions like the PC or, the Xbox Series X or the PS5 version, or even Series S that has the 60 frames per second mode, though. But in either case, though, as a whole, I still recommend this game. I still enjoy it even after all these years and all. And I am definitely looking forward to seeing what else CD Projekt Red is going to be capable of doing down the road. I'm hoping to see more of their stuff make their way onto Nintendo's platform, especially the Switch 2 and all. Okay, this concludes with my review of the Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk 2077. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about the Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk 2077? Did you pick the game up when it launched? Do you think the Switch 2 version holds up very well? Are you impressed with how the game runs on the Switch 2 though? Do you think the gameplay is still good even after all these years and everything like that? Are you happy to see that the developer actually put the full game along with the DLC into the 64 gigabyte Switch 2 cartridge and all? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off in the comment section below. Let me know what you think. And if you do like this video, I hope you hit the like button. I would appreciate it. And I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You could do it through PayPal Me, Patreon, or Steam Labs. Links will be in the description of this video, assuming you're watching this on YouTube. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that'll be soon. Until then, from Southern California, I wish you all a good day then. Bye!